Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to look at the disapplication request process for 22-23. Due to the volume of attendees that we've got, we just ask that colleagues remain on mute and that the video stays turned off, but please just make sure that you use the chat along the presentation if you've got any questions. We've got some DFE colleagues that will be monitoring the chat, so they'll be able to answer any questions as we go. But hopefully we've got some time at the end as well for a quick Q&A session. If we don't get to answer your question, we will follow up after the meeting. So if you leave your name and where the local authority that you're from, we'll get in touch with you. So just to introduce myself, I'm Annie Wood and I work on the pre-16 funding policy implementation team. I run the general disapplication process, but I'm also presenting with my colleague today, Andrea. So do you want to introduce yourself, Andrea?
Hi. So I'm Andrea Latheran-Casole, and I'm from the Local Authority Stakeholder Engagement team, and our team lead on the school block disapplication process. So just to go through the legislation beforehand, a key to a good request is including the sufficient level of detailed information enabling the minister to make a decision. Within the department, when ensuring the request, when receiving the request, what we need to understand is why the request is being submitted, what has changed to mean that this transfer of funds is needed, and also if it's a continuation of a medium to long-term strategy, what process is being made, what impact would this have if it hadn't been approved, and also what alternatives have been explored. Also, it's the schools, have they been consulted on the proposals and a breakdown of their decision? Any evidence you can provide showing the schools and the schools forum support is expected. When a calculation is needed, please also attach the calculation so we can see how this will impact the affected schools and detailed modelling that you've carried out to ensure the fairest distribution of funds. The operational guide, pre-16 funding guidance, includes detailed descriptions of what evidence needs to be submitted for block movement requests, as well as what should be presented to schools forum and what forms the consultation.
So at the moment, there is a bit of uncertainty with the Minister's preferences and the priorities given the recent reshuffle. But some of the examples of common requests that we receive can include the block movement, which is usually to move the funds from the schools block to the high needs block. Andrea will provide more details on those on the next slides. MFG requests, which can be to vary the rates or for exclusions. So for premises, split sites, mobility, exceptional rents, joint use and PFI factors. But there is also the MFG baseline adjustment to prevent overprotection or to exclude the one-off reserve funding from the baseline. There's the request to vary pupil numbers. So when requesting to vary the pupil numbers, that doesn't include increasing where there's a reorganisation, but we just ask that you write the narrative of that on that when you submit your APT. And that also applies to where you're increasing the admission limits as well. But we do expect that you would present any of those changes to the schools forum to demonstrate the impact on the budgets. There are lump sum requests, so that's the variation and protection on amalgamation. Early years requests, which could be to reduce or to increase funding for 2 or 3 to 4 year olds. Sparsity would be any changes to the criteria, but given the changes an increase in funding through the factor this year, we would expect that there would be minimal requests. And then where there are requests that are relating to a particular school, we might need to come back for some more information on performance, as that's something that ministers are often keen to review as part of the decision making. So for the minimum per pupil level requests, you might wish to disapply the MPPL value where there's a school that's skewed significantly by unusual year group sizes. So for example, if a local authority They might want to provide higher MPPL for an all-through school if they might have much significantly larger secondary schools than primary year group sizes. But often a reduction in MPPL would only be considered on the grounds of affordability. So you would need to provide us with some detailed evidence of the modelling, showing all of the options that it's being considered, and if it was unaffordable to enable a robust business case to be presented to ministers for consideration. So the ministers are very clear that they want the MPPL to be met by all local authorities.
So as noted on this slide, the schools block will again be partially ring-fenced in 2022 to 2023. Local authorities may transfer up to 0.5% of their schools block funding into another block with the approval of their schools forum. Just to give you all on the call today a bit of background figures from 2021 to 22, we received 16 requests. 10 of those didn't have approval from the schools forum. 5 were below 0.5% and 5 were above 0.5%. And these requests were rejected by the minister. The other 6 requests that did have schools forum approval, 5 of those were agreed. The minister is unlikely to agree requests that haven't received approval from the schools forum. Additional funding provided through the high needs block this year and next means that any case for approval where schools forum don't approve or the value is above 0.5% will need to be very exceptional. The high needs funding is increasing by £780 million next year, following an increase of £1.5 billion over the last 2 years. This represents a minimum increase of 8% per head of 2 to 18 population next year for every local authority, with some local authorities receiving as high as an additional 11%. This slide details all of the evidence that we would expect to receive with a school block movement request. We need to see this information to give a summary to the minister of why the high needs costs are exceeding funding level allocations and details of short, medium and long-term strategies planned, including financial data and accompanying narrative. Ongoing intervention work by the team has been undertaken during 2021, and last year we produced a DSG management plan, which can be used by local authorities as a supportive tool. We've put a link to that within this slide. This slide continues to set out the evidence that we'd expect to see for a school block movement request, including, as mentioned beforehand, information presented to the schools forum and all schools through consultation and details to the transfer proposal.
So where to find the disapplication request form? The disapplication request form for both the general and the block movement requests are available on the pre-16 school funding guidance page for 22-23 on gov.uk. That's also where the operational guide is. So that page will also cover what's required in the disapplications in more detail as well. We do ask though, if you are unsure if you need a disapplication request, please do email us directly or get in contact with us through the la.disapplications@education.gov.uk mailbox. We will provide that mailbox with you as well. So yeah, if you just want to get in touch with us, if you aren't sure, then we're more than happy to have a conversation with you or put something in over Teams and just have a chat and try and advise on that a little bit as well. So for the general request form, we would ask that you include information on why you think the request is necessary, what schools are going to be affected by the request, and what the impact on them might be. We'd also ask to see if the schools would benefit from the request and whether that meant that maintained schools and academies would be affected in the same way. And then we just to note as well to summarise what your request is either at the beginning or the end of the details section. You might wish to include some brief attachments to support your request. So that could include something like the calculations or the modelling, or if you wanted to attach your school's forum reports and the minutes as well. But we would just ask that what you do send to us are relevant. So if you could highlight the section that is relating to your request, that would be really helpful for us. So as we've previously mentioned, it is critical that you provide any additional detail that will help us review your request, because that will minimise any delays in getting your decision. So we're not sort of coming back to you asking for more information. And then once you've completed that form, if you just send it to the same mailbox again, so it's the LA disapplication mailbox, and then we'll start getting that processed.
When submitting the school block movement form, we'd be very grateful if you could complete all of the sections and include all relevant information, as a decision is based on your initial pro forma. We'd also request that a full breakdown of the maintained schools and academies consultation be included, and if for any reason the schools forum have not yet met, then the result of the consultation be emailed into the department the next working day after the meeting has occurred. So when submitting a school block movement request, please complete the additional tab on the disapplication request form attaching relevant documents. Would ask that you include a full breakdown of the specific budget pressures that have led to the requirement of the transfer. This would include the changes in demand for special provision over the last 3 years, and how the local authority has met that demand by commissioning places in all sectors. It's particularly important that any changes in provision for mainstream school pupils with high needs are highlighted, so those schools can understand both why a transfer of funds from the schools block might be needed and how future transfers may be avoided. If you could also demonstrate an assessment and understanding of why the high need costs are at a level that exceeds the significant final high needs funding allocation for 2022 to 2023, and that plans are in place to change the pattern of provision where this is necessary, as well as to achieve greater efficiency in other ways. If you're attaching documentation such as your SEND strategy, please refer to the exact page where this can be found. We do need to emphasise the detail required within the form, as limited information may result in a delay in receiving your decision.
So you are also required as part of your request to complete an equalities assessment. So the Equality Act of 2010 requires you to have due regard to the need to eliminate discrimination, harassment, victimisation, and any other conduct that is prohibited by or under the Act, to advance equality of opportunity between persons who share a relevant protected characteristic and a person who does not share it, and to foster good relations between persons who share a relevant protected characteristic and persons who do not share it. The equalities assessment that you provide should include any impact the request could have if it was either approved or if it was rejected on pupils with protected characteristics. So any insufficient detail leads to a delay in processing, so it really is important to take the time to ensure that this is completed in detail. So for this year, to help support with the equalities assessment, for the this is on the general request form, we've introduced a new equalities assessment guidance within the actual form. So it's the two tabs there that are highlighted in yellow at the bottom of the form. So one of those tabs is sort of to give the guidance on how to submit the detailed equalities assessment, and then the other one is this table that's shown on the slide. You don't need to use this template at all, and you are still welcome to use your own that you have within your local authority. However, we just ask that it does sort of have similar detail provided as this one that we have, because if it's not done correctly, we will have to come back to you and it will cause a delay in the process. So the deadlines for the disapplication request this year, so we've got the 11th of October 2021, and that's the deadline for submitting the request for general requests if you are requiring a response by December. And then we've got the 19th of November 2021, and that's a deadline for all general requests if you require a response by the APT deadline, or it's also the deadline for the schools block movement requests where you're wanting to move above the limit of 0.5%, or where the schools forum have not approved, or both. We do ask where it is possible to send your disapplications in as early as you can, but and also that now that Schools Forum are able to meet virtually, we would expect to see that Schools Forum have been consulted before you send your request in. However, if you haven't met with the Schools Forum, don't worry, just please send in the request form as it is before the deadline date, and then just follow up with the additional Schools Forum minutes and the outcomes from your Schools Forum once that they've happened.
So we've included some useful links that going to be sent out to yourselves as already advised.
If there is anything else, then you're more than welcome to email us at the LA Disapplications mailbox, which I'm sure a lot of you might have, but we can also send that out to you if you don't have the direct contact to it. And if there isn't anything else, then I'll bring the presentation to a close.